So you look around the world and you see huge disparity in the human condition. You see some people that are desperately poor. You see others that are living in opulence. What is determining these differences in the human condition? Why are some societies working well compared to others? And why are some not working? The tools of economics, particularly the tools of mainline economics, can shed light on this. They can help us understand how does culture and institutions shape the decisions that humans make. How can we change the incentives of policymakers through institutional change so that they can create better rules to help us live in peace and prosperity with one another? These ideas that were pioneered by Adam Smith, they're very much alive right now. There are people that are trying to apply these insights from the main line of economics to try to make our world a better place. Mainline economics is based on three propositions. The first is that humans have a natural desire to exchange with one another, truck, barter, and exchange, as Adam Smith said. And this exchange is a process of exchange. Number two is that this process of exchange is profoundly influenced by the culture and the institutions within which it takes place. You get very different outcomes based on different culture and different institutions. And three, these institutional differences are themselves the product of exchange, except it's exchange often in the political marketplace, not in the private marketplace. That's actually, I think, probably one of the strengths of mainline economics, is that its analytical focus is on the imperfections of institutions and how we can improve them and reduce frictions. So if you think about one version of mainstream economics, it's just to assume in this highly mathematized model of reality we call perfect competition, that you have multiple buyers and multiple sellers, and they're interacting in a frictionless environment in which property rights are perfectly protected, contracts are complete, information is complete, you have zero transactions costs. It's basically this antiseptic, really clean and elegant mathematical model, but it assumes away all the important and interesting characteristics of what makes societies work well or not work so well. Mainline economics really shines a light on those institutional differences to understand under what circumstances are property rights more or less complete, under what circumstances are transactions costs high or low, under what circumstances are the norms of culture such that people feel that they can interact with one another and trust one another and have lower transactions costs so that they can exchange with those with whom they stand to gain. Mainline economics is really focused on, in many ways, those important frictions that can stand between mutually beneficial exchange.
It's only through the existence of property, contract, and consent that individual pursuing their own self-interest can be led to promote the interests of society as a whole. It wasn't that anytime I pursue my self-interest, I'm going to generate a positive outcome. It was instead very institutionally contingent. And that basic idea runs from Adam Smith to Jean-Baptiste Dessay to John Stuart Mill into the early 20th century, including F.A. Hayek and James Buchanan and Ronald Coase and Doug North and Vernon Smith and Eleanor Ostrom. Mainstream economics is just whatever's currently fashionable at the time. If you think about it in a very simple sense, it's what's currently being considered the cutting edge of science, and everyone considers that to be the fashion. Sometimes the mainstream is the main line, and sometimes there's huge divorce between the mainstream and the main line. And when there's a huge divergence between those two things, it takes entrepreneurial action by individuals, such as the ones that I just mentioned that won the Nobel Prize, to pull economics back to its core teachings from Adam Smith to Vernon Smith. There's a great claim by John Stuart Mill in his book, The Principles of Political Economy, where he notices in passing the great rapidity with which countries bounce back from war, famine, hurricanes, and fire, and how they come back within a generation. But the question was, how is it that they come back? Mill just sort of says it's a great, mystery to us. And so instead, we're trying to explore that here, and we started our work at Mercatus by studying the failed and weak states and the collapse of communism in the less developed countries. So we sort of use this three-legged bar stool idea. So imagine you have a three-legged bar stool, and each of the legs of the bar stool represents the economic and financial institutions in your society, the social and cultural institutions in your society, and the legal and political institutions in your society. Now, what you're going to do is put stress on that bar stool. And if you put stress on that bar stool, but if one of the legs is weak, what's going to happen? The bar stool will topple over. So that bar stool can only hold if those legs are strong. And so the question was, what happens when we have to reform because we've wiped away those legs from the bar stool? And so Hurricane Katrina gave us a natural experiment in this, and to look at the way in which political and legal institutions interact with economic and financial institutions and social and cultural institutions. And so what we did was we put 3 different teams into the field. So one team studying the legal and political, other teams studying the commercial and entrepreneurial, and another one studying the social and cultural capital. What we found, by the way, was that the social and cultural building, civil society, co-evolves and in fact strengthens commercial relationships as well as undergirding the political and legal environment. And that too often in times in the current system, the political and legal environment is a block to the interactions between the social and cultural and the commercial relations in a society. And so that's been a major part of our research here. And it applies even to things like other crises. Because again, you can have crises that come about because of things like financial crisis. And how is it that you can rebuild, cities after that? It could come about through technological innovation, and cities actually that used to be the hub of economic activity are now no longer the hub of economic activity. How does Youngstown, Ohio, after the steel industry, try to come back? Can we talk about something and learn something from the difference between the way Detroit has had to react after the decline in the auto industry and Pittsburgh after the decline in the steel industry? How these cities rebuild themselves, and what is the crisis, and how is it that social and cultural, political and legal, and economic and financial institutions either work together to help transition a society or fight against one another and keep us from allowing that kind of growth and development? Well, I think the biggest problem that mainline economics faces is the same challenge that Adam Smith faced, which is that economists are talking a lesson to politicians which politicians don't want to hear. And so as a result, since politicians have to hear it in order to implement it, but they don't want to hear it because it puts constraints on their behavior, that communication gap is always something that we have to work at. And there becomes only very significant small windows of opportunity when real social change can happen. And the question is, can you capture those strategic moments? We at Mercatus are involved in the ideas business, and that's our main focus, is to actually work on ideas to, again, social understanding and social criticism. But there might be a time when, based on our social understanding and based on our social criticism, there might be an opportunity to introduce real ideas for change. And that is what we have to sort of work on doing. But our primary responsibility is first and foremost as scholars and scientists, and that is focusing on social understanding and improving our social understanding. And that's what we're trying to do with our different research initiatives and educational initiatives here at Mercatus.